much for joining us today on another interesting but informative edition of Enterprise Morning, reaching you from Enterprise Television. I am Henry Igwebike, and we kick off today with our newspapers, and right after that will be our main conversation also for today. Please do well to be part of what we do. Have a say in what we say. You can always find us at enterprisetvnews.com. You may equally like, comment, and follow us on all our social media platforms at Enterprise TV7. We're very so honored to have with us, joining us via Zoom, Hassan Soweto, the National Coordinator, Education Right Campaign ERC. Good morning to you, Mr. Soweto. Hello, good morning to you, Mr. Soweto. Hello, can you hear me, Mr. Soweto? Okay, I think we're having a little bit of a glitch there. Hello, Mr. Soweto, can you hear me? All right, still Enterprise Morning, and we're just kicking off today. Good morning to you, Mr. Soweto. Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning, sir. How are you, sir?
Thank you. I'm very, very fine. Thank you. Thank you so very much for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome, sir.
All right, so let's kickstart today with our newspapers, of course. We have a trendy topic that I think is very important that we talk about it, especially knowing that you are in the educational ecosystem, and I think you might have your 2 cents on this particular matter. We on Monday, June 23rd, that is, we have it, the popular social media activist Martins Vincent Osei, known widely as a very dark man, took his protest to the residence of the Federal Capital Territory FCT Minister Nyesom Wike over the ongoing strike by the primary school teachers that has left pupils out of school for over 90 days. Please, we'd love your take on that particular matter.
Well, thank you very much. I think the first thing to say would be to commend the very dark man, because the way the young man has transitioned from just being a celebrity, a social media celebrity, to using his platform to take up issues that concerns Nigerians, I think is actually very commendable. The fact that he has now moved from just taking up issues of fraud or issues of maybe exploitation of a few people to taking up policy issues, defending the right of workers or other Nigerians who are affected by government policy. I think it's a transition that really is very commendable because of the kind of impact it can have in the collective struggle of the Nigerian people. And this is a lesson, I think, that other social media celebrities should emulate, because they have this huge power that many people don't have. And the fact that, very dark man can use his own platform really, can really be help the struggle of the Nigerian people. I mean, the strike has been on for a long time, and very few people outside of the FCT knew about it. But from what has happened yesterday, it is the entire country, that is aware that such a thing is happening. And that can put enormous pressure, for instance, on the FCT minister to do something about it. But that's a very big embarrassment, that, the FCT minister actually faced yesterday with that protest. It was not just a protest alone. It was a protest with the pupils, sitting down in front of his office, eating in their school uniform, learning the alphabet. That's also, I think, a very dramatic angle, that helps to show that the FCT minister's action in not meeting the demands of the teachers, is denying the younger generation, the future, of the country, an opportunity to be in school. I think very dark man actually should be commended.
Very, very true. He should be commended. But my question is, what kind and type of leadership do we think Nyesom Wike is practicing? Just recently, he renovated the International Conference Center with 39 billion naira. Every year, he makes available 10 billion naira for the rent for senators, especially the Senate president and a few others. do you really think Yesem Wike is really the man we all see him for? The talk and do, the Mr. Contractor and all of that. Do you think he has got that leadership thing in him, or he's just playing to the gallery? Because what these teachers are asking for is for the minimum wage, 70,000 naira. And it's difficult for the FCT to provide that.
See, I mean, we can't mince words when it comes to the likes of Wike. Wike's position as FCT minister is an error. By virtue of his antecedent politically, by virtue of his personality, by virtue of his temperament, by virtue of everything that Wike represents, such an individual ought not to be found in any position of responsibility, much less a public office. That is notwithstanding the fact that he had been a former governor, former minister of state. But when you look at all of his accidents, even in those roles, he was mostly, a bulldog, in those roles over his staff, ranking roughshod over the people. You can see, even after he left Rivers State, his role in the political situation in Rivers State also shows the kind of person he is. But I think that the fact that the likes of Wike continue to find themselves in position of responsibility is actually an indictment on the capitalist political leadership of this country, because it does shows that leadership in Nigeria right now, the standard has completely dropped. Decades ago, when you are talking about leadership at the level of the Nigerian capitalist elite, you'll be talking of statesmen, the likes of Awolowo, statesmen, people who are intellectuals, people who have certain visions and philosophies about the nation building. But over the past 25 or so years of democracy now, we have seen all kinds of characters, crooks of all kinds come to power. It's not just that they are corrupt leaders and all of that. It is that their behaviors and code does not even edify. It's not edifying for a political office. So that even apart from all of the question of the policy implication of not paying teachers the minimum wage, even apart from all of that, even from the point of view of the kind of person that Wike is, I think is an error. But of course, when you then take it to the question of the policy choices he has made, the fact that he will prefer to spend public resources, on those things you have said, instead of providing, support for human capital development by paying minimum wage, to teachers, something which would obviously have a very resonating effect on the quality of teacher and all of that, is another angle to it. And it does show again the kind of, characters that we have in government. So that I think what we should say at this level is that the strike of those teachers has to be supported. In fact, I think with what Very Dark Man has done yesterday, what should be calling for now is a wider solidarity with the FCT teachers, which will involve the NLC as well as the TUC, actually declaring a solidarity strike with the FCT teachers. So Very Dark Man has had to expose the fact that for several days now, weeks, pupils and children in the FCT have been out of school because of Wike's refusal, to pay the minimum wage. What can be done now to consolidate on that publicity, it's for a full-blown solidarity strike, even just for a day, by workers in the entire FCT, led by the NSC and TUC, to back the strike of the teachers. I think that will really send a very clear one to Wike, but not just to Wike, but several other governors around the country who also are failing to pay the minimum wage. Because it's not just Wike alone. All across the country today, the minimum wage of 70,000 naira is not being paid in most states of the federation.
Very, very true, Mr. Soweto. But let's take a look at other matters from the Guardian newspaper for this morning. And straight up to EFCC arrest ex-NNPC chief over alleged $7.2 billion fraud. Mr. Soweto, I would love to believe you were very much aware when the NNPC under Mele Kyari brought in legacy media stations and they went to Port Harcourt refinery. They renovated one, so they said, yes, to tell us and to show us how that the refinery was working. But now it is becoming evident that it was all fraud, it was all criminal activity happening there. I'd love you to speak to me on this particular matter.
See, I mean, that's why some of us are advocating for a socialist revolution as the only way to begin to resolve the problem of this country. Those who think that just going to vote every 4 years to elect people into power can change this country, they are suffering a delusion. Gradual changes is an illusion in this country when it comes, to addressing the crisis that faces. Because, Nigeria is a crime feed. Nigeria is not a country. And some of these cases are just, examples that tells us, that this country is like an animal on the slaughter slab. The Port Authority, what about the aviation? It's a whole series of crime going on. And particularly when it comes to NNPC. NNPC is not, it's an account, it's not under the supervision of anyone. It determines how much, of oil revenue that it receives from oil majors, that it declares into the federation accounts. Is an entity that is shrouded in mystery, in opacity, and this has been the case for decades on end. When it comes to the refineries, since under Obasanjo, billions of dollars have been sunk on several occasions to supposedly, repair the refineries. And usually, just like the scenario you have just described now, is what we hear. They will say it remains 18 months for it to become operational. It remains 2 months. Port Harcourt refinery is now operational. What is going to follow? Then 6 months after, you don't hear anything at all. And it doesn't have any impact on the crude oil, refinery in Nigeria. It is a complete pack of fraud. And this fraud really has, a design. It has an end. It has an end game. It's not just a fraud committed by individuals. Let me be clear to you. Those individuals that they are going after are just the scapegoats, because the system needs to, put forward scapegoat from time to time in order to give the impression, that what is happening is just the mistake or the avarice of one person or the other. Whereas this is a systemic, fraudulent scheme going on, something that has a pattern and something that benefits an entire class of the capitalist elite in this country. And why do I say this? Why do you think that a private refinery of the size and weight of Dangote refinery, was fully supported by the federal government and the Lagos state government over the past few years to become established with public resources? Why? And that was done despite the fact that you have 4 refineries that are public refineries. Why do you think that was the case? So, and then the second question is that, why do you then expect that when a private refinery of the level and size of that refinery is supported by government to become established, why do you then expect that the public refineries would ever work? If they have not worked even before now, how do you expect that they will now work now? Because if they start working now, if actually they are fully repaired, then they become competitive, with the Dangote refinery. And that becomes, a problem, given the kind of agreement that went into establishing private refinery, Dangote refinery. So we have to be clear about it. So far that Dangote refinery exists today, any hope that any of our public refineries will ever be operational is completely a delusion. Rather, they will continue to use those public refineries as a means to loot public resources and dangling it in the eyes of the people as if the government is doing anything. And that is part of the tragedy of this free market economy that we are practicing in, whereby a public resource that belongs to the entire country is turned into the hands of just a few people for them to make any much profit, and at the detriment of the Nigerian people. Look at what is happening with the fuel price today. With the Iran-Israel war now, crude oil price in the world market is going up, which therefore means that corn price of fuel in Nigeria will also go up. Why should it be so? It is completely irrational because we produce this thing. Yeah. But on the logic of the free market economy, and the Dangote refinery becoming the key refinery, operational refinery entity in this country, fuel price will never go down to a level that average Nigerians can be able to afford. And that is the entire tragedy of it. So I think that beyond just catching a few people, what we need to do in this country is a complete revolutionary overthrow of the existing status quo. We cannot continue like this. We need our oil and gas industry to be put back in the hands of the people. And it's not just the Nigerian people, also the Niger Delta people who are facing the full brunt of our production. And meanwhile, they are not even getting any benefit from it. Today now, corn price of fuel is higher in the Niger Delta than in the rest of the country. And they are the producers of these things. This kind of generational historical injustice cannot be allowed to continue anymore. And that is why arresting just one person, as far as I'm concerned, is scapegoatism. In the next 1 year, another scandal will break out again. That of the former minister of petroleum resources, Alice Madueke, is still there. It is a complete fraud. It's a systemic fraud, and it cannot be resolved so far the current system continues to exist.
Very, very true. It's so very important that you made some of this facts, because one would ask and wonder, why should the Niger Delta region, which produces the fuel, have higher prices of PMS and other products? And it's so very not fair, because lots of people would ask that. But don't you think that the leaders of sub-states, sub-sovereign states, could be blamed for some of these things? Don't you think governors of the south of the south region have what it takes to change all of these things? Do you think they have the power to at least create or evolve a change with respect to their community?
See, on the surface they do, but in reality, this problem is not a federal government problem or a state government problem. It is a systemic problem. Those who are governors in the states and the people who are in the presidency or in the NNPC or the Ministry of Petroleum are the same people. They are the same people. So what is happening therefore is that the demarcation into federal states is only demarcates the access to the loot. It doesn't mean in any way, therefore, that the people who are in the states are any different from those at the federal level. In fact, the state governors sometimes are even worse, because those ones even do deals directly, with the oil majors, which means therefore that when there is oil spillage, the governors, instead of enforcing the rights of their people regarding the regulatory agencies to ensure that those villages that the oil majors are made, to clean them up, the governors just collect money from the oil majors and they forget about it. Look at what is going on now with the divestment, for instance. What has happened now over the past 1 year is that under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, all the 5 international oil companies that have destroyed the Niger Delta for the past 60 years have been allowed to leave the Niger Delta without paying compensation for all the environmental damages they have committed, all the devastation of people's lives they have committed, and while leaving all of their facilities not decommissioned in those communities where they have been operating for the past 60 years. That is what has happened over the past 1 year. And have you seen any governor, raising that at the level of the meetings they hold in Abuja? Have you had any governor publicly, raising those issues? It is only the communities and the NGOs and CSOs who are doing their best to try and advocate the issue. I know for a fact, for instance, that just last week, Friday, the kingdom of Ekpetiama, their case against Shell over the divestment, actually came up at the Federal High Court. It was the king of the community who had to enlist a lawyer to actually go to court to challenge that divestment process. The governors are not doing anything. The state house of assemblies are not doing anything. And this divestment process was done in complete violation of the Petroleum Industry Act. And the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu actually played a role that showed his complete bias to the oil majors, apparently because he himself is directly linked to the oil industry. He was an accountant in Mobi prior to when he went into politics, and obviously his nephew owns what do you call it? An oil company. Ohando, which also is a beneficiary of the legal divestment. So when I say that it's a systemic fraud,
are you still there?
Legal divestment process that violates the Petroleum Industry Act that was just signed into law just 4 years ago, and but an entitlement of something which means therefore that you are now, by virtue of the fact that his relative is the president of Nigeria, is able to have access to a huge chunk of the public, of the oil resources of this country illegally. Corruption. Then what else are we saying? So we are not talking about that. We are not focusing about that. We are focused on only a few millions. I'm not saying. I'm saying that the bigger have actually passed themselves. They only give us a few people as scapegoats to give the impression that the system is working, whereas the system has really been rigged against all of us.
Very, very bad. Truly, truly sad. And I truly do sympathize for these communities that are largely affected, not just by climate change alone, but equally from the activities of the oil majors that have contributed in the pollution of that
in fact,
particular community.
Let me add this. Let me add this time aloud.
Please do, yeah.
President Bola Ahmed Tinubu now is making serious effort to restart crude oil production in Ogoni.
Yeah.
The whole idea of giving that very insulting state pardon to Kensaroriwa and the other 8 Ogoni activists who were murdered by the Abacha regime is an attempt to throw a carrot at the Ogoni headers in order for them to permit the resumption of crude oil production, which the people of that community have been rejecting since last year. At least the youth of the community, there have been at least a few meetings where the youth of the community rose up and said no. Because even up to now, the cleanup of Ogoni has not been concluded. Over 10 years ago, thereabout, it's allegedly started. But yet, you want to resume crude oil production. And because of that, you say your government is pardoning somebody who did not commit any crime, because pardon indicates that a crime had been committed and the state has decided for whatever reason to then pardon that crime and forget about it. So when you pardon, it's an indication that a crime was initially committed. Yeah. But Kensaroriwa did not commit any crime. Yokorina committed no crime. The Abacha regime, on behalf of Shell, robed them in a fake and false murder charge in order to get them out of the way for the oil majors. That was the first state murder in this country on behalf of the multinational company. And this happens everywhere where there are minerals, everywhere in Africa. They are doing it in DRC Congo. They are doing it in Kenya. Everywhere there is minerals in Africa, politicians, political leadership, and the states are killing their own citizens who decide to rise up against this resource exploitation. That was what happened with Ogoni 9. And President Bola Ahmed Tinubu did not have the courage to recognize that an injustice was actually done to Kesorewa and co, not by pardoning him, but actually by erasing that charge, first charge against him, and by apologizing on behalf of the federal government to his family, and by doing every other thing to rehabilitate his name posthumously. That is what Ogoni 9, that is what they deserve. But to tell you that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is in the service of the oil industry, that is why you had that state pardon. Because that state pardon helps to cover up the role of Shell and the role of the Abacha regime in the state murder of a Nigerian citizen. Now, what we're talking about now is that the Shell, both the Shell subsidiary in Nigeria and the in the pockets of the oil industry should be doing. But rather, what they are doing is to issue a false insulting state pardon and use that as a basis to get Ojogoni community to accept the resumption of oil production by entities that bought Shell assets. So Shell actually sold those assets in Ogoni to an indigenous company they call Renaissance Africa, which from our investigation is obviously a front for many politicians. So, in the real sense of the word, it's a cover-up that is going on. And it's very sad, but also not surprising, that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is the one pretending over all of this. So that is what we should be focusing on. There's a crime going on in this country, crime against the Ogoni people, against the Niger Delta people, against the Nigerian people. People don't understand the history of these issues. What is happening as far as I'm concerned with the NPCC people do? They go and catch Yahoo boys who have stolen some $100. Meanwhile, the real thief, the rogues, are quasi-legally or quasi-illegally robbing the entire country with impunity.
Very, very true, Mr. Soweto. You actually fleshing up that particular story because of, lots of people would say President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been a neoliberal leader from a very long time, even from being the Lagos State governor from 1999 to 2007. He has always practiced the new liberalism. So activists equally have stated that fact. And let's not forget, given what you have said, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is the substantive minister of petroleum resources. So, yes. He has all the powers in the world to do all of that. But of course, the fact remains, doing things the wrong way with good intention is not actually doing it right. That is the most important thing. Well, we would leave it at this particular point, just to let you know that Hassan Soweto would be here to take us on our main conversation. That is when we return. Ribado Defense Chief warned poverty, food crisis, now national security threat. That in a bit is still Enterprise Morning. Please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.